problems is sort of like a disjunct between the learner's expectations and sort of like the teacher's expectations. So of course, as a teacher, I want to be teaching the content, but the students also have an expectation of developing their language skills. Now, sort of a lot of the EMI literature refers to issues where the teachers and the students worry about linguistic skills. And of course, a lot of teachers in a lot of reports don't really have an expectation of...
Jenny, are you in room 15? Okay, give it to me. I'm 5 JALT, and you can go.
Okay.
I was going to say, well, I'll log out and log back in under the proper one.
It's okay. I'm just going to pass it over to Jose.
Or Sam, do you want it?
I'll log out and log back in as JALT 15. Give me a second.
Then I'll give it to you.
All right. So, of course, a lot of the teachers don't necessarily have expectations of dealing with linguistic issues, or they don't really know how to deal with it.
Wait, I'm only co-host.
All right, I'll make you host. Oh my God, Adam is supposed to be doing this session.
Holy Jesus.
Guys, you're talking right over the top of it, and I can't...
According to this, you're supposed to be doing this session.
Room 15, dude. Room 15.
Sorry about that, Nate. I don't know what's going on.
All right.
Jose, your mic's on.
Okay. Where am I? Okay. So there's issues with the teachers. So for example, in my classes, I've had to make all of my own course books and basically simplify everything because there's no way the students can access academic books written in English. And at the same time, there's also, you know, a lot of the students in EMI lessons are expecting the benefits of EMI to be sort of like language related. So there's a report from, I think, Scandinavian universities by Tatzel, and he described how about 50% of students expected language to be the main benefit of EMI. And in a report by Galloway et al. In 2017, they talked about Japanese and Chinese students. And around about 67% of the respondees talked about language benefits, and only 8% of students identified the topic as the reason for joining an EMI course. So that's kind of like one problem, is that teachers are often focused on the content, but the learners are expecting to be focusing or benefiting linguistically. And a second problem is that obviously language ability is important in EMI. So there's been several recent studies that show that language ability is sort of a predicator of being able to succeed or get a high score in EMI content. And Uchihara and Hanada argue that a lot of this issues is down to the technical vocabulary. And if students are able to master the technical vocabulary, then great. They will probably succeed better in EMI. There's also a couple of studies that talk about the need for skills and preparedness in EMI. And there's 2 studies at the bottom that talk about sort of like the psychological aspect, self-efficacy and self-perception of success as being clear predictors of EMI success. So in my case, and from the literature, we see a lot of students using various survival techniques, things like borrowing international students' notes, hiring an international student as a tutor, choosing math-based courses so that they can get by without using too much English, recording lessons to listen to again and again. In my case, I've noticed students attending the equivalent Japanese course first, or doing pre-reading in Japanese before attending English language courses. And of course, we got things like in discussions, code switching, using glossaries. And again, I've noticed students actually paying an international student to make a glossary and asking for TAs to help with translations and so on in classes. So in my case, for my seminar class, which is really crucial for the students, they've got to write their graduation thesis. And if they don't write the graduation thesis or they can't take the classes, then they're in big trouble. So I wanted to measure some different things to think about whether the students were ready. So I wanted to focus on willingness to communicate, basically for discussions, for presenting, for asking the teacher questions. I wanted to focus on their listening. And obviously, this is the flip side of willingness to communicate. If you're communicating, you've got to listen to the responses. You've got to listen to your peers teaching you things from their texts. You've got to listen to your peers' presentations, and you've got to listen to the teacher's instructions. And note-taking, which in my classes, a lot of the content that they're learning and a lot of the skills that they're learning come about from feedback that I give or other students give during the class. So the students have to take notes in class in their seminar classes. I'm skipping reading and writing for a couple of reasons. The main reason is that a lot of the reading and the writing goes on outside of class. So if one student is not as proficient, they can get by, doing extra work before they come to class, which should hopefully improve those skills without affecting the whole class. So my data collection for this to check their willingness to communicate, their listening and their note-taking, I asked all students that join the seminar class have to join, they have to watch their senior students' graduation presentations. So at the end of the 4th year, all of the students have done their study and they present or they give an academic presentation, and all of the junior students in the 3rd year or joining from the 2nd year join and watch. So I chose 2 of these presentations. I chose the first from the morning session and the first from the afternoon session for the students to watch. The first study was done by a student who studied the cultural perceptions of the Japanese workplace, and she interviewed 50 non-Japanese workers in Tokyo. And then the second presentation the students watched was attitudes and experiences and motivations of Malaysian students studying Japanese and Korean. And this student surveyed 180 Malaysian high school students. So the data collection is based around my incoming students, my newly incoming students watching this presentation. The first thing I did was I invited all of the newly incoming students to join this data collection. And out of the 8 incoming students, only 2 said yes. And they were offered a 4,000 yen gift card, which was provided by research funds to join this research. So I ended up on the day of the presentations recruiting again, and I got 5 students. I got 5 students who are just beginning writing their theses, TA and K, and I got 2 incoming students, N and M, who are just about to start studying with me. All of the students mentioned practicing English as a key for joining this class. Which pretty much goes in line with what we said in the literature review. Now, in terms of their willingness to communicate, Zahiki and McCroskey wrote a paper in 1987, and this was kind of backed up by another paper by McIntyre, Babin, and Clement in 1999 that talk about students who are invited to do this kind of research with their lecturer or their teacher. Those students who don't go are kind of exhibiting a low personality trait of willingness to communicate. Okay, so they're kind of saying they're not really keen on using English or they're not very keen on willing to communicate. So the 6 students who declined to join, I'm already considered have got low willingness to communicate. The 5 students who did join a course have all got, I would argue, are all displaying a reasonably good willingness to communicate outside of classes. Okay. So I gave them some surveys. These have been used in previous studies. There's a personality trait of willingness to communicate, a group willingness to communicate, and a class plenary willingness to communicate survey. They're done on a Likert scale up to 10 points. And there's a couple of red flags in here. So student K, who's been studying in my class for a year already, showed 1.7 and 2.9 for respectively for trait and class willingness to communicate. I've got a couple of doubts about student N and student M as well. Essentially 3 on this Likert scale equivalated to I would rarely do this. So we can see that student N and student M would rarely want to communicate in English in general. Student K, who's in the class, and I've spoken to her a lot about her troubles in class with participating. In group work, she scores quite highly. And this started to make me think that rather than evaluating a student and rejecting them based on something like this. We might use it as a sort of metric or a measurement of their progress over time. If we could measure their willingness to communicate, you know, before they joined the class, and then later we might see progress in these metrics. So this made me start to wonder about what I was doing. Once I'd given the students these willingness to communicate surveys, I then asked them to answer some listening comprehension questions about the presentations they'd watched the day before. So in the listening comprehension questions, something really important came out that I hadn't predicted was the choice of language that the students chose to respond to the questions. I'd written the questions in English. It's an English seminar. I assumed they would answer in English. Only T and A answered in English. K and M answered in a mix of English, and N wrote everything in Japanese. So if we revisit the willingness to communicate aspect of this, it started to make me think, oh, hang on a minute. N doesn't want to write in English, but she has to write a journal. She has to write a thesis in English. And K and M are a little bit less confident in writing in English. That makes me start to worry about their English abilities. And again, as the students want to improve their English, what it's telling me is this is something we need to deal with when they join the class. So going back to the listening comprehension scores were not great, okay? So this is presentation 1 is sort of in the center. There was a maximum of 27 points they could get for presentation 1. Student 1 got 44%, student 2 got 26%. The others are in the sort of teens scores. And then for presentation 2 with these listening comprehension questions, student 1, she got 82%. So I was looking at that thinking, oh, that's pretty good. So in terms of their listening comprehension, I'd chosen the presentations for a couple of reasons. I'd chosen the presentations because they're a model of what students are going to have to do when they graduate. And I'd also chosen the presentations because they are, to me, that's the kind of standard that the students have to be able to listen to. They have to be able to understand some technical vocabulary based on willingness to communicate. They should have taken, based on intercultural communication. They should have taken those lectures before, so they should roughly know some of the content. And so I want to know if they're able to understand stuff that's going to come up in weekly lessons. Based on that, I'm pretty confident that T would be okay. A, K, and M, they're all getting, if you put those scores together, they're getting under 50% on the tests. Student N maybe would be okay. So that's one thing I wanted to do, was check their listening comprehension of the graduation thesis standard presentation. The next thing I wanted to do was check their listening behaviors. And I thought at the beginning I was going to be measuring how much they can understand in their listening, but I'll tell you for the reason why I changed this later on. But what I did was I gave the students a video player with a rating button up and down to a score of 10. Okay, this is kind of like a specially made video player. And you can see how the students rated their own understanding of the presentations. So this is presentation 1. You can see that for presentation 1, student T rated a lot of comprehension at sort of 8 or above. Okay, she got 44 for presentation 1. She had a similar chart for presentation 2, and she got 82% in presentation 2's comprehension quiz. Student A did the same thing. She gave herself, you know, a sort of a score of 8 for comprehension. She rated herself as she's listening to this presentation in the video the second time round, and she's saying, okay, that's what I think I could understand. This is presentation 1. She actually only got 26%, and that made me start to think, well, did she really understand it? And I elicited some listening strategies later on. Student A actually listened to the presentations, went home, found the bits that she couldn't understand in the course book and looked them up, which I thought was a really great skill and tells me that she's actually ready to cope with these kind of dynamic lessons that we have. Student K had low willingness to communicate. She also scored poorly in comprehension. And we can see that when she self-rated herself, she's coming out at a sort of rate of 2. out of 10 for comprehension of presentation 1. Presentation 2, she got a little bit better. Okay, she's rating at sort of 3. But again, you can see she only scored 11 and 12%. She only got 1 or 2 questions right on the comprehension questions, which again is a bit of a worry. So student N is the reason why I changed from comprehension to listening confidence. If you look at this chart, student N gave herself 10 for comprehension, but she only rated 14 on the she only got 14 on the comprehension quiz. And this made me start to wonder what she was really rating. And she actually said to me during the interview, I understood, I just forgot everything again afterwards. So there's something very strange going on here. She's saying that she can understand it really well, but she's only getting 14%. And again, for student M, there's huge chunks of this presentation that she clearly did not understand, couldn't pick up, couldn't get. So that's extremely worrying for me. And as I said before, I went back and I actually got students, when I looked at these charts and we found problems, we went back and we did a stimulated recall. We watched the video, we interviewed, you know, what happened at this point of the presentation? What was your problem? Why couldn't you understand it? What's really nice about this is I could see for student T, she did some great stuff that told me she was really capable of being academically active. She looked up words on a smartphone that she didn't understand. She understood presentation structure. She could relate what was happening in the lecture, what was happening in the presentation to lectures she's previously seen. She went onto the university server prior to the presentations being given and previewed what the titles were so she could work out what was going on. So student T shows some really, really great active listening behaviors, which make me confident that she's okay in this course. Student A, what I thought was really nice was she researched unknown items. She went home, she said, I didn't understand these words, and then she found them out later on, which was a really great skill. Student K, we were already talking about student K's willingness to communicate issues. We're talking about student K's comprehension issues. She confused homonyms. She couldn't pass words. She tried to focus on individual words while she was listening, and she couldn't concentrate on pictures on the slides or words on the slide and present a talk. So she had a lot of listening problems. Student N, as I said she understood, but then forgot stuff. And like, it really made me wonder why she's resilient to a lack of comprehension. And then student M, what makes me really worry about student M is that she has a translation approach to reading the slides and listening. She's going word by word and couldn't pick up what was happening in the presentations. Okay, the last item I wanted to check was whether the students were able to take notes. Okay, and again, as I said earlier, the notes are really important because I'm not giving, direct handouts in this lesson for them to take home. They have to be able to take their notes to get topic information, and they have to be able to take notes to get feedback from their peers and from me about topic and academic skills. And if they get any new vocabulary during the class, they got to write it down as well. So with notes, I wanted to take an IU approach, which has been described by Siegel in a paper. Now, Crawford says that Crawford et al. Say that taking academic notes is vitally important for any kind of university study. What I did was I sent, immediately after the presentations had finished on the presentation day, I sent the texts, I sent the videos off to a transcription company, I got them back, and I marked them down for information units, which are kind of like the very smallest chunks of information. And what you'll see is in presentation 1, there was 156 information chunks, and in presentation 2, there was 134. Did the students take notes? No. Student T forgot. Student A scribbled a few things down. Student K and student M couldn't understand, so they couldn't take notes. And student N was focusing on presentation skills, so she didn't take any notes about the topic. So once I'd done all of this, I wanted to synthesize what was going on. I took a look at all the data, and I think what you can see here is all this data is telling me that student K is going to probably struggle in this course. She's got low willingness to communicate. She struggles with comprehension, and so on. The other thing that was really, really clear here is that the university as a whole has a real issue with note taking. None of the students were taking notes. This is the beginning of their third or the beginning of the fourth year of their study, and they're really, really not taking notes. Now, what I want to say about this, what I really want to say about this is that based on the fact that the students are talking about developing their English skills, I'm starting to wonder whether this is more a sort of a diagnostic. Rather than evaluating whether students are ready, I should be using this as a diagnostic for saying, this is the skill you need to practice. These are the things that you're going to go away and do in the spring break before we begin EMI classes. So that's basically what I've been working on this year. I think it's obvious that things like the willingness to communicate and the listening comprehension and ratings, they need a longitudinal study to really sort of, they need a longitudinal study to verify whether these things actually have a long-term effect. Okay, if a student begins with low willingness to communicate, over time, do they develop willingness to communicate, or does it stop them from participating, for example? So that's what I'm working on at the moment, and I think I can expand that into a bigger study. So I've got about 3 minutes left. I'm just wondering if anybody has any questions they want to ask at this stage. Absolute silence.
Well,
it's quite a lot of information. If anybody's interested in the software that I use, they can send me an email and I can send them the software. But I think the key takeaway from this is that there are a lot of students out there who are beginning EMI classes and they're not ready. And they're not ready in various ways: willingness to communicate, listening strategies, listening, just general standard listening comprehension, and even things like note taking, which, you know, we kind of assume that students are able to do. It seems like there's a lot of work there before we start letting students join those kind of classes.
Yep. Okay. Well, thank you so much, Nathan. I'm really sorry about the confusion at the beginning of your presentation.
It's all good. It's all good.
Everybody, please, thank you very much. Everybody give him a big round of applause. And I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording. Oops, wrong thing, wrong button. Okay.